which will be followed by a piece of music. So I invite you to settle yourselves as best you can into this holy time and space as we hear these words and music. Voice still and small, we turn inward as we listen for you on this Easter morning. Deep inside all, open our hearts to hear you in the figure of Jesus. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, his followers continue to hear that still voice of pure love. In the uncertain days after his cruel death, the memory of his words surely comforted him. The quiet voices of one another, the tender holding of one another through grief. Through all the years, they held on to his voice, and they found their own voices. Holy spark within us all, may we too hear the voices of love, voices that the powers would drown out, even still today, if they could. May we too notice the stirring of conscience, the rustling of compassion within ourselves. Whether the voice speaks to us of our neighbor who is hungry, or the young people yearning to be accepted as they are, or the tragedies unfolding overseas, let us not shut it out. The voice of truth and courage sings through all the years when we're open to hear that voice and to be that voice. It matters not how long it has been dormant in us. The voice, still and small, can be resurrected at any time. Easter is listening, hearing, heeding, and being that voice. Let us celebrate it thus, and may it be so.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Our next reading isn't exactly what you'll see in your bulletin, but it is what you'll hear and what you'll see on the screen. It's entitled What Gives Us Life by Vanessa Rush Southern. Life is complicated and uncertain, and gorgeous with some things that we can count on. It has seasons of delight and seasons of struggle, and sometimes the two blow in and bloom simultaneously, like now, and maybe always. And we are here together, all of us coming from our different corners of the world, different families, different backgrounds. We're all here together, breathing together, questing together, holding each other through it all, laughing and singing in the face of it. If there's a journey to liberation, if there's a way to live resurrection, I think it's like this. May what holds us in the bondage to death or life or loss or hurt or sadness or literal heartbreak, let that be released. And what gives us life and joy and hope and rebirth be invited to claim us, and may we claim it. Sinking our roots down into what grounds us and reaching toward the sun. After a season of loss and winter, struggles of heart and mind and spirit, let us emerge as the daffodils or tulips are doing, flowering into this season, all of whose traditions witness to life more abundant. May we open our hearts to the abundance of creation that surrounds and sustains us. These words are easy to hear. They kind of flow. But I hope that when we step out into this beautiful spring Easter day, when we part from our gathering, that we will actually see some of the beauty of creation and actually be reminded of the reason that we come and gather and speak about such things in these sacred walls. Well, my friends, it's been a busy little time for your minister. I have had the not typical privilege of participating in a Maundy, Thursday service. And then there was the Good Friday service. And then there was the planning for and arranging just so of all of our Easter lilies. And while these activities, in addition to the typical adventures of my typical week, have kept things hopping for me, get it, Easter? The biggest adventure has been preparing this morning's message. Progressive preachers often experience this around Easter time, given varying theologies. And so, while Jesus' physical resurrection probably won't be too much of our focus, we could centralize on the new life Easter theme of springtime's blossoms and buds. But the daffodils and the tulips, through their impeccable beauty, already offer a quiet and perfect homily that doesn't need a second-rate encore from this pulpit. For inspiration, my mind kept going back to something Kate McCanahan said. Easter teaches us that life never ends and love never dies. Never ending and never dying reminds me of an Easter story told by a preaching professor by the name of Fred Craddock. Fred recalls that in his church they had a tradition of inviting the congregation to purchase a lily, just like we did back in those days, for $5. And that Easter lily would be a memorial to deceased loved ones, just like we did. And they would list all of those names in the bulletin, just like we did. So for years they did this, and there would be, this must have been a sizable congregation, there would be year after year around 500 lilies. So 500 lilies at $5 per, and 500 memorialized names in their bulletin. That had to have been one mammoth bulletin and one aromatic sanctuary. but no one seemed to complain. Well, it just so happened that on the 16th year of this custom, a longtime member by the name of Alice inquired about wanting permission to take her Lily to the hospital later that day to see an ailing friend. Upon receiving no direct reply to her inquiry, she took it upon herself right after the service to go up front and get a lily. As she picked it up, she gasped, and everyone else in the sanctuary stopped in their tracks and wondered what on earth was wrong. Alice slowly turned around with her lily and proclaimed with disgust, "It's plastic." Faces fell, brows were furrowed, grumbling was heard throughout the sanctuary. An unidentified voice from the back rang out, "Have I been given $5 a year for the last decade and a half for the same piece of plastic?" A mathematically astute parishioner came forward with the calculations. $5 times 500 for 15 years means we have spent $37,500 on fake lilies. The minister, sensing an uprising, hustled to the chancel to make his best attempt to defend the false flowers. He admitted that they weren't real, but countered with the fact that the money had been spent on those in need. Well, some present seemed to buy this, some did not. So the minister had to dig a little deeper into his defense drawer. Thinking on his feet, he hoped that a theological approach would win over the remaining dissenters. So he said, in addition to the money being spent for a good cause, it's fitting for Easter that they be plastic because these lilies are eternally in bloom and never die. Never ending, never dying. And then, with one last-ditch effort to contain the mutiny, he concluded by saying, after all, we don't want to waste Easter, presumably with ill will. Not having been on the scene all those years ago, and I can only imagine it was so many years ago because you could get a fresh lily for $5, we'll never know exactly how long it took that minister to swim out of the deep end of the plastic lily pool. And more intriguing is the unanswered question, did they start getting fresh lilies after that? And if so, what in the world do you do with 500 plastic lilies? This helps explain why nobody complained about the aromatic part of the sanctuary. So we'll never know these things. But one of the takeaways of this story, besides never mess with congregants when it comes to their deceased loved ones and money, another takeaway is this idea of not wasting Easter. Now that might sound like an odd thing to say, but think again, especially if your personal theology, as is the case with some of us here, doesn't exactly align with the traditional doctrine. It would be easy to just put it in neutral for Easter, coast through, focusing mostly on seeing some of your buds and Lisa's killer rainbow punch sherbet that we'll have in the back. If you're in that space, perhaps you will gain something from what was written by a man named Paul Dodenoff. And he entitled what he wrote, "Why I Celebrate Easter Even Though I'm a Non-Believer." Intriguing. Let's read on. Paul said, "People ask me why I celebrate Easter even though I'm not a traditional Christian, and as such am not a believer in the physical resurrection of Jesus. I celebrate because I believe it to be a spiritual metaphor, one of the most powerful and heartening of spiritual metaphors, for our own development and resurrection to new life. He speaks first about the need for the Good Friday business of dying to what he calls his small, petty ego stuff. And then he says, every day offers yet again the chance to experience our own divinity and our own spiritual transformation. The stone is rolled away and the tomb is left empty every time we acknowledge our own Christ reality, or whatever you want to call it, that reality that all beings and things are part and parcel of the ultimate divine mystery in which we live and move and have our being. Allow me to boil that down just a bit. He sees Easter as being more about him than anything or anyone else, including Jesus. He sees Easter as every day, kind of like my mantra about Valentine's Day, which is Valentine's Day is every day for lovers, but this is Easter style. He thinks the stone is his stone of stubbornness, and the tomb is his tomb of tiredness spiritually. These things that distance him from his divinity and his transformation to embracing all of creation and its divinity. And so, what do you think about his angle on this Easter thing being way more about himself than about the other stories? I can tell you it makes it harder for me to put it in neutral and just coast through because the theology doesn't really fit what I believe. Whenever a concept becomes more relevant, or more specifically, more self-applicable, there tends to be more there in it, doesn't there? It's like we're bringing new life into this resurrected new life story. And the part that I like best about it is that it has no boundaries. This way of looking at Easter is just as relevant to a Jew as it is to a Gentile or any place that you could possibly be on the planet in any era. Let me tell you the story of a non-Christian, who embodied this understanding of divine love and transformation. As a 13-year-old girl, Jewish girl in Czechoslovakia in 1944, Fritzi Fritzl, along with her mother and two younger brothers, were deported by the Nazis to Auschwitz. It was there that her mothers and brothers died. She recalled, when we got onto the train, none of us knew where we were being taken, that it was a concentration camp, but then we heard the lock that was going on and being locked from the outside. And then we knew that wherever we were being taken to, it was not freedom. There was no way to describe, she said, what it was like to be in that rail car, hungry, cold, without food, without water, watching pregnant women beg for water, watching people, including my own grandfather, dying in front of you for lack of food and air and water. Fritzi endured a torturous year in the concentration camp and then in a Nazi labor camp. And then in 1945, she was finally liberated by the Soviet army after escaping into a forest during a death march. She tells the story of the promise that she made to 599 other women who, with each little crumb of bread, kept her alive during her Holocaust experience. After the war, in 1946, Fritzi came to none other than Illinois. She came here to be reunited with her dad, who had come here prior to the Holocaust to have a job and start providing for the family and eventually get them moved here. Fritzi married a former U.S. Marine veteran, and she made a life for herself in the Chicago area and became an avid Cubs fan. Her call to activism occurred in 1978 when a group of neo-Nazis threatened to march in Skokie, where she lived. The outrage over seeing the swastikas in their own town galvanized Fritzi and other survivors into establishing the Holocaust Memorial Foundation of Illinois with the purpose of fighting bigotry with education. The museum opened in 2009, and it is currently the third biggest Holocaust memorial site in the world. Fritzi served as its president. Ever hopeful and optimistic, she understood how hate and intolerance can lead astray if not left unchecked. And this drove her entire life to educate and empower people, inspiring them to become, and I love this, upstanders, not bystanders. My friends, this is an example of the Easter story that is never bound by time or geography or religion. I'm betting Fritzi never once officially celebrated Easter, and yet her life, by the reflection of divinity and by the transformation that she experienced despite an unimaginable suffering as Jesus did, she embodied the Easter message every day. And then she died when she was 91 in 2021. When I hear Fritzi's story, I can't help but wonder what others will say about how I embodied the Easter message throughout the days of my life. And perhaps you too wonder what they'll say at your memorial about that, or how you'll be remembered when your loved ones look down at their Easter bulletin and see your name beside the lily memorials. May we not only be inspired by these stories, but may we be transformed in our life toward new life by them. So may it be for each of us this Easter. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, perhaps about Fritzi's story, but also, and maybe more importantly, what your thoughts are about the idea that Easter is really about us truly being in touch with our own divinity, that we're the divine one in this story, and we're the one about whose transformation the story finds its meaning.